Welcome back to yet another episode. So this time, I was actually surprised. There was a request that I actually do this video, and I've actually had a number of people inquiring about the Sigma 170-500 APO lens, which really surprised me because I would figure most people would be wanting the newer generation 150-500 or 50-500 HSM, although the 170-500 as a budget super telephoto lens with 500 millimeter focal length, I can understand why there'd be some interest in this lens. However, I will be straight up with you, it is not a very sharp lens. At 500, it is really not a very sharp lens, at least from my experience on the K3 Mark I. My mind kind of changed when I used it on the K3 Mark III. So this is going to be a video, same lens, two different generations of K3. K3 Mark III, which is what I'll start off with, using AFC, and then we will switch over to the K3 Mark I. I'm going to keep the settings as similar as possible between the two cameras. On the K3 Mark III, because there are a lot more autofocus options, I'm going to have to dumb it down on the K3 Mark III. I am not using subject recognition. In other words, subject recognition technically I have on. However, I am not using the auto or zone autofocus. So the subject recognition is basically, it's turned off because it only works in zone or full autofocus. So I'm going to be using center, which is the circular area. There's five autofocus points in that center area, which is about the same as spot in the K3 Mark I. So that'll be very similar. I'm going to be using AFC, and I will keep the settings the same. I'll be using TAV at 1/2500th of a second at f8. ISO will be auto, and I know they're not the greatest subjects, but they are plentiful and consistent, reliable, always in flight. So I'm going to be shooting gulls and just compare the image differences between the K3 Mark III and AFC on the K3 Mark I using the Sigma 170-500 APO. So let's go. Yeah, seems to always happen every time. Every time. Now, remember, I did state this is not a very sharp lens. And it is stopped down to f8 because that is when the lens is the sharpest. If I open it up anymore, all the images will just be full of aberration, and there won't be any detail or anything. So for the people who want to complain about the video, these are obviously not going to be exactly the same as to the two different cameras and how they deal with a screw-driven, old-school film era super telephoto lens. And actually, there is one thing I want to show you. So the issue with the lens in regards to autofocus, at least on the K3 Mark I, is the fact that there is play in the screw drive. Not sure if you can see that. Let me see what you guys are seeing here. You probably can't see that. Oh, there you go. So there is play on the screw drive. And that is why on the older generation cameras, it doesn't focus very well.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. What birds are you looking for?
I'm recording a video just showcasing a lens and two different camera bodies.
Oh,
Actually, it came for seagulls because they're...
a lot of people have been down here in the last few days, but mostly last week. The sandpipers came here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they come from Argentina.
Okay.
They stop here on their way to James Bay.
Oh, okay.
And when they come, it looks like a black cloud out over the lake.
Oh, is that many of them?
Hundreds of them.
Wow.
But I think they're gone now.
Oh, I always show up at the wrong moments. I'm not sure if you guys caught that. One of the residents here was explaining that lately a lot of people have been coming within the past week because I guess there's been hundreds and hundreds of sandpipers that have shown up in the region. I haven't seen any. I was here last week too. Still didn't see any. But, you win some, you lose some, right? All right, well, I guess that's about it for now. I'm going to switch over to the K3 Mark I with the same lens and see what happens there. Oh, what is that? I believe that was a kingfisher. All right, time to switch camera bodies. Okay, so now I have the K3 Mark I mounted, just to show you. I know the sun's starting to creep through here. So there, K3 Mark I, you can tell by the largeness there. 17500 APO Sigma lens. Same settings. And let's take some shots and see what happens. Yeah, already holding the K3 Mark I, the grip seems tiny compared to the K3 Mark III, like way small. And the edge doesn't seem to, the intersection, I'll show you, the intersection here, there aren't really many seagulls coming around right now, so the intersection right in here, it just doesn't, it's not very deep to really have a good, firm, comfortable grip. Yeah, so I mean, they really did their homework with the grip on the K3 Mark III. There's one. Where are you? All right, let's wait for another one. Or same one. Facing the wrong way. There we go. And yes, both cameras are actually set to focus priority in AFC. So those settings are the same as well. Actually, something I just noticed now is the K3 Mark III is so smooth that this now sounds and feels slightly clunky. And that's a huge thing to say, because the K3 Mark I was actually a pretty remarkable camera. But realistically, I mean, the difference between the two cameras is, I mean, using them back to back, this feels, it just now feels just very clunky. You know, click the button, you feel like a click, and then there's a delay, and then it fires. And the K3 Mark III, everything is just completely and utterly butter smooth. Like, it really is an extension of your creative hand and your creative mind. You know, just, yeah, it's a completely and utterly different experience.
So what have we learned in this little experiment with the Sigma 17500 APO film era screw-driven super telephoto lens on the K3 Mark I versus the K3 Mark III? Well, for starters, the improvements to screw drive autofocus on the K3 Mark III is actually tangible. There is a very stark difference between the two. The K3 Mark III does not hunt nearly as much as the K3 Mark I. With that said, a lot of the differences come down to the vast array of improvements that have been implemented in the K3 Mark III. As I was saying previously, the K3 Mark I, as much as I loved that camera, that was my do everything camera, it now just feels very mechanically clunky. It feels slow in regards to its responses to your inputs, and pressing the shutter. And now, like, I can actually notice a delay between pressing the shutter. I never noticed it before. With the K3 Mark III, there just seems to be such a minuscule amount of delay. Like, you think of something, you do it, the camera just responds. It's an incredibly large difference between the two cameras in regards to the response and the speed of how the camera actually responds to your input. In regards to the 17500 APO, yeah, it is not a sharp lens. It is not a sharp lens, as you can see right here, especially with subjects that are at a fair distance from the camera. It just does not have the resolving power for fine detail. Just everything. Yeah, like this is not misfocus. This is just how soft that lens is, and this is stopped down at f8 when it's supposed to be the sharpest. When something is closer and there's decent light, then it's not so bad. I mean, it's still not super sharp, but it's not nearly as bad as when objects are further away from the camera. It's really hard to recommend the lens. If you're on a budget and you're willing to really put in the work in regards to extracting the most you can from that lens, then I mean, you might be happy with it. It's really hard to say. I personally wouldn't recommend it. And that's why most of my videos you'll see when I'm doing these kind of shots, I'm using the 55-300 PLM, just because it's a sharper lens. It's a much sharper lens, and even taking a shot at 300 and then cropping in after the fact, I'm still getting a better result than shooting with the 17500 APO. I mean, if you really are dreaming of getting that 500 millimeter focal length, then, I mean, you can take your chance and try to get it, but you can clearly tell it is just not a very sharp lens. And that's pretty much all there is to it in a nutshell. There's no getting around that. It's just not a very sharp lens. Yeah, so that's it for this video. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you haven't subscribed, I wonder why, but please do, helps me out. If you'd like to support the channel, I leave that info at the bottom of the description. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and you will see me on my next video. I'm out.